Welcome to the While You Were Working podcast, presented by Rogue Marketing. When you're responsible for revenue, it's hard to look up from the work, but while you're doing your day job, the market shifts. While You Were Working is where we turn today's trends into tomorrow's strategies. Welcome to While You Were Working.
Welcome to While You Were Working, the podcast for revenue accountable business leaders wanting to stay ahead of the curve. I'm Chip Rosales, managing partner of Rogue Marketing. We're business builders carrying a marketing toolbox, and we're so glad you're here. Between driving growth and navigating uncertainty, staying ahead, that's no small feat. That's why we sit down with leaders who aren't just managing change, they're defining what comes next. The world moves fast while you're working, and today's guest is leading the charge into the future of impact-driven technology. Joining us today is Nicki Purcell, a recognized futurist and the Chief Technology Officer at Morgan's. Morgan's is a nonprofit organization that creates ultra-accessible, fully inclusive places like a theme park, splash pad, camp, sports complex, and health and social services, where people of all ages and abilities can come together, they can play, learn, and connect. All right, Nicki's at the forefront of applying cutting-edge technology to mission-driven organizations to bridge digital divides, harness AI, and unlock human potential through innovation. Nicki, I'm so glad you're here. And I realize I just said a whole lot of things that Morgan's does, but that's what's so great about Morgan's is it's a very expansive place. I did not do the best job in telling us about Morgan's. How do you describe what Morgan's does?
I think you did a great job because you're right. It is a lot of different things. It's a mouthful, but it's also an experience. We really refer to it as an inclusion initiative, and that enables us to think of it as more than one industry. So while we have Morgan's Wonderland, which is a fully accessible theme park, and we're in that industry, we're also just on the precipice of building our first Morgan's Hotel. So we're also in hospitality, for example. So you did a great job of describing it. It's a lot of different things.
You've had a pretty exciting past. You've been, I think every level of executive at some point in your past. What led you to this position? What led you to do what you're doing right now?
Well, definitely the mission. I mean, I have worked with nonprofits. I've had the distinct opportunity of getting to lead an agency that became a B Corp. So wanting to give back and being mission driven is just in my DNA. But this mission in particular is very close to me personally. And so being a part of it is what helps drive much more than just driving a business. It's really the opportunity to give back and be part of something bigger.
That's amazing. Okay, so you've got this really expansive role. What are your top priorities in your role here at Morgan's?
Well, top priorities are just understanding where technology is either currently a pain point and we could remove that friction, or whether it's something that we could actually accelerate some of the goals that we're trying to achieve. Both of those are looking at it from an internal perspective, and it's something new as a new role within the company to be able to look at it from that side. Certainly something that complements that's critical for what I personally like to do is just think about our guest experience. Whether it's a member at the Multi-Assistance Center, whether it's a guest who's going to check into our hotel in the future, or someone who's going to our theme park. And as I mentioned earlier, with the sight-impaired technology that's advanced, or someone who might be hearing impaired, there are just people who are continually creating amazing technology and solutions. And so what I try to do is make sure I'm staying ahead of that, evaluating those, and then identifying if that's something we can bring into our environment. Because ultra accessible is something that is really at the base of everything we do. And we've got to make sure that we're staying at the cutting edge of that for folks.
It makes me think of what we were talking a little bit ahead of time, and you talked about how you love to study the industry. Why is that so important in what you're doing?
Well, I think technology changes so fast, and I truly believe it's only speeding up. You know, I recently finished a certification in AI. When that was finished in the fall of 2024, I thought, okay, I have a good feeling about where it's going, what I know now. Some of the convolutional neural networks I built, I felt confident in how I went about doing those. And, sitting here almost 1 year later, I think I'd probably tackle those same challenges differently. And the speed at which technology is moving, the pace at which we're expected to adapt to it, just makes it really critical to do as much horizon watching as possible and staying ahead of the curve.
I saw that AI certification that you were talking about, and was it like 10 months? I think it was something. It was a very long certification process. Do you recommend that? Is that something that individuals should do? What should they maybe be looking for? I mean, that was a very specific, I thought about that, and I was like, man, who should be doing this? And is it worth the effort when you sit a year later? And yes, I think you built you mentioned you built a lot of processes and ways to think. That's amazing. That could be the value. Or you might have some other thoughts. What are your thoughts on certifications and when people should do them?
Well, I think that it really depends on who you are and what role you're in. When you're talking about the AI specific one, it met a very specific need for me at the time. But I get that question a lot, which is, do I recommend it? And it was a lot of work. It was something that I thankfully learned the building blocks on. But I didn't do it with the intention of building a lot of code in the future. In fact, Code Assist and the technology that's evolved even since really doesn't necessitate us to have to get to that same level that I went through in that particular program. But it's a confidence builder. It is something that helps certainly just have better understanding of where things are going. And in leading teams who are doing these things, really does create an opportunity to hold accountability because you know enough to be able to enter the conversation and have leverage with firsthand knowledge.
What I think I like about that is like your face lights up when you're talking about this. So it's clear to me that you're putting all those Jenga pieces together and that actually does energize you. And I think that's what every team leader really needs to have. We've talked in the past about how technology, you want it to empower rather than isolate. And I think that would be very easy to happen at 8 different entities at Morgan's, and I'm sure there's more on the horizon that you guys are even thinking about. But can you share a recent project where that mindset, we want stuff that empowers rather than isolates, where that mindset actually allowed you to create something new or brought something new to Morgan's?
At Morgan's, we're all about accessibility, and we've even actually trademarked that term. But the term empowerment is actually one of our core values. And so when you ask about an example, one of the things that I think is really important as technology evolves is that our team members feel empowered to be able to make recommendations on suggestions, on changes. When we are at the cutting edge of technology, a lot of times what we've done is custom built a lot of what we've done. And for the right reasons, that makes sense. Technology evolves and you might wake up one day and realize there's 3 or 4 solutions that work for what we built. And in that case, we need our culture, our team members, to truly feel empowered to bring that back as an alternative solution. But what I think is key when it comes to empowerment is enabling the team to be able to make that assessment and then make recommendations there.
And I think it's probably important that you can go in and out. You can go in and out of archetypes. You can go in and out of strategy reasonings why you might do something. And lots of times we kind of get into our little blinders of like, we've decided this is enterprise wide and everybody has to do versus there may be strategic reasons to do something in a different way. So I definitely appreciate that. Well, this podcast is about revenue and outcomes. And everything we've been talking about has been definitely mission driven. There's a higher purpose in all of it. And yet at the end of the day, it still matters that those dollars are used well. You're a nonprofit, so you want to be able to have great accountability on that. And you are looking to make sure that revenue is spot on. So how do you juxtapose those two positions, revenue versus purpose?
Well, I think that they're not completely independent of one another. And I think we've done a phenomenal job of being creative about how we go about scaling the revenue side of that. The biggest difference I found in my short time of working at a nonprofit, not just with nonprofits as clients, is the sophistication in which we have to evaluate where revenue is coming from. So you have certainly grant opportunities, you have donors, there's even state funding, but a lot of that comes with very specific ways that we can slice and utilize those funds. And so the sophistication of identifying where unrestricted funds are or funds that we need to appropriate is really where the work begins on trying to identify a revenue goal with balancing it against the mission. And so some of that is dictated to you based on where that revenue is coming from. And the other is getting really creative and making sure that you're solving it for a bigger challenge. So, at the end of the day, anything that we're generating for revenue at Morgan's is going towards our cause, and they don't come into conflict. It's about how we slice that.
I think I've heard you talking about too, and maybe, it's conferences or wherever there may have been, but this idea around treating the nonprofit as a for-profit business center in the sense of the way that the for-profit is run, the way that people are thinking about that. Can you talk a little bit more about like that philosophy and maybe how you've brought that into the organization?
So a lot of my background was working as an officer in a publicly traded company. There is nothing more exhilarating and frightening than quarterly earnings. And so what I've learned in that experience is just the rigor, quite frankly, that goes around hitting the revenue target in a quarter, but also making sure that your expense analysis is on target as well. One of the things that is also very different is building a plan for the year and then checking it and managing it as the year goes, where you don't have that opportunity, quite frankly, when you're building and working within a publicly traded company. So what is similar regardless is going to be the need and desire to set goals and then be able to check in on them regularly and make sure that you're working towards hitting those goals on a regular basis.
Yeah, I was writing down all these great words. I mean, that's exactly right. And I love that word rigor. That's such a good way for anybody who's listening to this podcast to be thinking about it as well. How about AI for nonprofit? Why is that such a good a direction for nonprofits to maybe be considering?
Well, I think it makes sense in the sense that, one, it's where technology is going. I didn't think after I had my certification and started focusing on Morgan's that there were a lot of people who were thinking about it specifically for the nonprofit sector. Now, I think that you hear a lot about what efficiencies AI should drive. And so one of the things that people are talking about most is those efficiencies, how they've been able to cut costs, how they've been able to replace headcount, how they've been able to be faster at what they're trying to accelerate and get into market. And all of those things are incredibly important for a nonprofit. AI makes complete sense, I believe, for a nonprofit. I just don't think there's a lot of effort that's been focused on going there because of the potential thought around the cost to implement, the knowledge base, the level of technical sophistication. But again, if we're thinking of a nonprofit as we would any other corporation, we absolutely should be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to ask you to exercise your futurist muscle, your technology muscle, AI and ethics. It's got to be one of the top concerns and one of the top conversations in the marketplace right now. What's your position on that?
Well, it's interesting because we've seen a lot of that with the different AI LLMs that people are using, whether that's ChatGPT or Grok, for example. And it's a scary place out there if we have the wrong biases in these models. And one of the things that I think about with ethics, specifically working for a nonprofit and one like Morgan's, which is all about focusing on needs of people who might have a disability, is that that's an entire underserved market that's probably left out of those biases. So when you think about translating, for example, text to speech, when you think about questions that people are asking verbally in order to be able to get answers back from AI with all of these devices that enable us to do that now, are we taking into consideration their perspective, their limitations, and the ability to make sure that we're serving those needs as well? And I think that ethically, privacy is absolutely critical. If somebody wants to be able to explain to AI they're interacting with what their disability is, we've got to keep that completely confidential because it's technically PHI, it's private health information. And so the ethics that people are looking at related to AI, I think are broadened when we talk about people who have a disability and who are using it, because it's just taking that next level of what the expectation is in terms of confidentiality and the risk of potentially even unintended biases coming into that.
That's incredible. Is there anything that corporations that might be listening to this could do with Morgan's, for Morgan's? Is there any way for them to get involved with what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So morgans.org is our website, easy to remember. And certainly there is the sort of home base of all of the different entities that Morgan's has. We have information there about making a donation. We have information there about this Inclusion Institute if they are interested in learning about our certification processes for getting to be an ultra accessible accommodation in their own business as well.
Awesome. Well, I sure appreciate you being here. Before I let you go, though, I'm going to do one of my favorite parts of this podcast. We call it Quick Takes. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I'm not looking for really long answers, just kind of what's in your gut and what do you think about that? And so, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
As ready as I can be.
As ready as you can be. All right. How about one trend that you're watching that could reshape nonprofit or mission-driven work?
Wow. So just one trend. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is making sure that as AI comes to the forefront and people start looking at it and seeing it in their feed, is that there's a lot of things that are false misrepresentation. There's an organization that is taking the time to take specifically image-driven AI and trying to build sort of a watermark solution around it. So it's available for people to understand when they see an image, if it was AI generated or if it's authentic. I think that's going to be incredibly important in the future.
How about a mind shift that leaders today should be thinking about if they want to be future ready?
I just think it's about evolving through curiosity. The more curious you are about the future, the more you'll learn and the more you can focus on implementing that within their company.
How about one word that guides your decision-making process when you're thinking about new tools?
For sure, cost analysis. Having come from software development and agencies and web builds, that this feels like this is the most expensive time it should ever be to build anything again in the future.
All right, my very favorite question, resource, podcast, maybe a book, some sort of report that you share by. You think it's sharpening the vision for
sure,
people?
TLDR. Too long, didn't read. It's the newsletter. It's not just one newsletter. It's a multitude of newsletters that are curated, delivered via your inbox and email. And you can even select which one is most appropriate for you. But that's the one that I live by and research and spend the most time in. And I encourage anybody else to take a look at it.
I love it. Well, thank you for spending the extra time with us. I mean, getting a futurist and somebody's thinking about all these things and putting all that together and then doing it for such a high purpose. What a great combo. Congratulations on everything you guys are doing at Morgan's, and thank you for being with us today. Will your Gen AI strategy shape your future or derail it? That's the focus of a recent Harvard Business Review article and the point of the conversation we just had with Nicki. Success depends on aligning clear priorities with disciplined execution, and it's a must-read for any leader wrestling with how to move from AI experimentation to real-world returns. So here's the gist. Researchers studied 100 companies deploying generative AI, and they uncovered 4 distinct strategic archetypes. They are bold innovators. Those are those that are using Gen AI to redefine their markets. Disciplined integrators, organizations that are building trust, control, and risk safeguards into their AI efforts. Fast followers. These are those that are going after low-cost, high-impact quick wins. And then strategic builders, firms that are investing for the long haul and aiming to build IP and a sustained advantage. In the end, it's a question of strategy, and there are a host of factors you're going to want to consider. Things like, have you weighed the expected benefits versus the cost? Risk versus that desired pace of implementation. Are you going to build or are you going to buy? One size fits all is not going to work. Your choice of archetype, or maybe multiple archetypes, shapes everything from team alignment and investment levels to risk posture and outcome expectations. Strategically thinking through these areas first can help align strategy, execution, and ROI. So take the time to read the full article to see which archetype fits your organization and why. Then use that lens to spark internal conversations. Are you pushing too fast without controls, or holding back when you should be innovating faster? Above all, remember, it's not just about having the technology, but knowing why and how it serves your mission. A link to this article is posted in the show notes. We'd also invite you to follow us on social media. Search Rogue Marketing on Facebook and X, or Rogue Marketing Agency on LinkedIn. We're regularly sharing insights and articles that you may have missed, while you were working. See you next time.